computer is picking up a strange signal. Here, sir, you better take a look at it.
Hi, and welcome to Sci-Fi Snacks. I'm Liz J. Bradley, a science fiction author and poet who adores short fiction and snacks. Each episode of Sci-Fi Snacks is a short and sweet, or salty, discussion of what I loved, what I learned, and what I snacked on while reading new-to-me short science fiction. As always, links to the short stories are in the show notes, so if you haven't read this week's story, head on over, pick up your favorite snack, and then join me as we discuss this week's story. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Sci-Fi Snacks. We are halfway through Season 1, if you can believe it. This is so exciting to me. Season 1 was always planned to be 12 episodes, and we're halfway. That blows my mind. So excited. Thank you for continuing to listen and chat with me online about these amazing stories. I'm so excited to keep reading and keep learning and keep sharing with you all the things that I love and learn. Now, for episode 6, when I started this podcast, I knew I wanted to ask my brother, who is a huge science fiction fan, to suggest a story for an episode. He, for Christmas, gave me a whole bunch of back orders of Asimov and Analog magazines. If you can buy like a box and they just throw like 24 different issues that they have at the warehouse, it's like a fun grab bag. And so I knew that he's out there reading these stories. And I asked him, I just sent him a quick text. I was like, hey, what's your favorite story that you've read in the last year written by a woman in one of these science fiction magazines? And he told me this one. So we are talking about The Night Shift by Zohar Jacobs today. This is a story in Asimov's science fiction magazine. Zohar Jacobs has published short fiction in the Sunday Morning Transport, Analog, and Clark's World. A graduate of Viable Paradise, she grew up in New Hampshire and now lives in England. Last year, she finally made a pilgrimage to Johnson Space Center. Zohar's latest tale for Asimov's tells the story of a Mars mission entering orbit during a chaotic hurricane evacuation from Houston and sudden new responsibilities for a young engineer. With all of that in mind, because my brother picked the story, I decided that I was going to pick his favorite snack, or at least what in my brain is his favorite snack, which is Skittles. I feel like every Christmas, every birthday, anytime he would be in a show and we were like, oh, we got to get him something, the answer was Skittles. Get him the biggest bag of original flavored Skittles that you can find, not like wild berry or tropical, like that red bag of Skittles. And so that's what I went for this time around. I also, as a shout out to him, bought them from CVS, which is one of the places that he used to work. And so I just thought that was extra fun. The bag I got had this little label on it that said something about the original lime flavor. Now, I know that Skittles went through this whole thing where their green one was originally lime, and then it became green apple, I think. And now they've gone back to lime. And they were very excited about it, and I was less. I don't know about you, but I'm a huge green apple fan. Are you team lime Skittle, or are you team green apple Skittle? I need to know. I think green apple should win, but we had lime this time around. And another cute little fun thing about Skittles, I don't know if this is a neurodivergent type thing or just my dad really liked math thing. Whenever we had M&Ms or Skittles or anything where there were multiple colors, we would always make like a bar graph out of them. And so then you would see how many of each color that you would have, and you would always do this, and then you would eat it down till they were like even. So if you had more reds than anything, you have to eat the reds until they're in line with the oranges or the yellows or whatever, and then you have to eat them down. So there's a very specific way to eat Skittles. I did not do that this time around. I was tempted, but again, I was reading in my car and I didn't have the space to graph my Skittles. Now, I know they do this in school because my kids have come home when they're learning graphs and they'll have done little cute graphs with candy and stuff. But was it just our family? It can't have been. So please, if your family graphed Skittles too, tell me, do you still graph your Skittles? Or do you eat them by the handful? I need to know. I need to know. All right. So we are now going to talk about what I loved about this story. Now, I think I want to start out by saying I was a little surprised that this was my brother's favorite story. And I don't say that because I think that there was anything wrong with the story. There wasn't. I thought it was a great story. What hit me, though, was how different it was from a lot of people's definitions of science fiction in a lot of ways. I think that we're running into this period of time where science can already do so many things. And you turn around and you read the Scientific American or just any news source, really, and you're like, wow, look at all of these advancements, things that were science fiction even 10 years ago are reality now. And so this story in of itself, it is science fiction. I will stand on that. I do think that it is very clearly science fiction, but it is near future, and it's not the science fiction of some of our past episodes where we're driving spaceships between galaxies and things like that. This is set on Earth. It is got so many things that are familiar, and then it's just little tweaks. It's that climate change is not just something that we can ignore like we do now. A lot of people are like, oh, well, there was a hurricane. Well, there's always been hurricanes. The hurricanes in this story, you can't ignore them anymore because they're so big and they're so destructive and they're everywhere, which is causing problems that are now becoming unignorable. And so it's just transporting us those couple decades into the future. And I think that that was really smart. One of my favorite things about this story, and my brother agreed because I asked him, was not the main character. She was great, but the millennial. We had an appearance from a millennial character. And I love that we were still close enough in time that using that language that, oh, this guy Justin with the perfect millennial name shows up and he's this old guy who's retired, but he's there. And it's just, what can I do? And in that moment, it was like a peek into our own future. And there was this very clear connection to it. And I loved that. Sometimes I think science fiction is set so far in the future that it can be a push when we try to make those connections. I know one of my pet peeves that this story did not do, but in far future science fiction, one of my pet peeves is when they make the main character kind of obsessed with like old Earth songs or old Earth fashion, and it's 90s fashion or early 2000s fashion or music or something, because you know that's what the author knows a lot about. And it always strikes me as, I don't know, I give it a little side eye because I'm like, you have gone thousands of years in the future, create something new. Why are they looking thousands and thousands of years back? I don't know many people now who look back and say, ooh, my favorite music is like ancient Sumerian music or whatever, thousands of years behind us. And then that's like a cool thing. That's just a little sidebar pet peeve, but this story was really cool because it had that connection. A millennial is a thing, and everybody knows what a millennial is, and it was just this slight reframe from someone a couple of generations younger, just starting out her career, looking at this old retired Apollo era worker named Justin, the millennial, which to me is just hilarious, and I loved it. And then Justin comes in and does all of this amazing stuff. And he's so hardworking and all of these like stereotypes about millennials, but like spun in a positive way. And I really loved that. So shout out to Justin the millennial because I loved him. He was great. Other things that I loved, the focus in this story was so unique in a way that we had 4 groups of people. So we have the astronauts who are on their way to Mars and they're going to go into Mars orbit. that, in my brain and in a lot of people's brains, I think those are the main characters, right? Those are the stars. Those are the people that you're writing science fiction. You're going to write about the astronauts going to Mars, right? Not in this story. Now, you then have kind of the people in charge at NASA. So we've got our Houston crew. We've got our Johnson Space Center. We've got some people up in Maryland. We've got all of these like really important players in NASA. And again, you would think, okay, if the astronauts aren't the main characters, maybe it's these guys. And then no, it isn't. Not in this story. In this story, it is the night shift, early 20s worker who, she doesn't own a house. She's got an apartment. She's not sure of where she's at in life. And it's so good because she's the one who's got almost this outsider's perspective of things. This is the first big time that something happens and this whole debacle makes everything fall into her lap. And that is so much more interesting than following an astronaut in space who says the computer could do this, but I'm just here to like monitor and everything's going to go fine because I'm a super trained professional and smooth story, right? And they're being shielded from all the bad things happening on Earth. But instead, Jacobs decided to look at this character who's on the bottom of everything, who has got the training. And that was really interesting. I love that in this future, we are looking at an entry-level position. And I think there's an essay, and I'll tag it in the show notes because I thought that this was great. We had a lot of the same thoughts. I definitely got what Jacobs was going for, where in this future, it used to be a high school diploma, graduate high school, and you could get any job. You could support your whole family and everything. Then I, as a millennial growing up, it was college degree. Didn't matter what your college degree was in, you needed a bachelor's. You just had to. And it didn't really matter which school. Like, I know that the onus was just get your degree. You'll make $1 million more in your lifetime. Haha, funny thinking about that now, being told again and again and again. But what we're seeing in this near future is that that's been amped up again and again and again. So our main character, Maria, has this amazing education and all of this experience and all of this debt, because good to know, student loan debt, it's still there in the future. Of course it is. But she has all of this and she's still at the bottom of everything because it's just like this arms race of credentialing and all of this, that the master's is the new bachelor's, the PhD is the new master's. And it's just going to keep going and going and going. So you've got these brilliant people who are now in these jobs that, quite frankly, they even say it themselves. In the Apollo days, it didn't matter. I think my favorite quote, let me look at it here. During the Apollo program, most of the engineers at Johnson Space Center were recruited not from elite institutions like MIT or Caltech, but from Midwestern and Southern state universities. A B average was good enough. Anyone who could spell Apollo, one man recalled, we took them. And isn't that the truth? We see it now. We see it now with every job requires at least a bachelor's degree. And you're like, why? What's the point? Because none of what I learned as a theater major in college is going to really be a base requirement for this job. And yet I can get that job because I have a theater degree. But somebody who has experience in something, if they didn't have that piece of paper, regardless of what that piece of paper says, they can't get the job. And then we see that amplified in this. And so we have all of these super educated people working the night shift and bored to death and learning on the job. It's really such a good visualization of that future and that arms race. And I thought that really, really rang true. And the last thing that I wanted to focus on that I really loved about this story is when you talk about it in terms of the synopsis and things like that, it sounds like it's going to be this really exciting, big story. There are 2 different super hurricanes coming, and the night shift people have to get out of town. They have to help get the first Martian astronauts into orbit, or it could be disaster everywhere. And it feels like it's going to be this really big cinematic type story. Like I think you can envision like a J.J. Abrams style film with that synopsis. And then when you dive in, the way I would describe it is like a quiet story. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative way. I don't think that there's anything wrong with quiet stories compared to rollicking, action-packed stories, because this story had tension throughout all of it. And yet it still felt we're riding this wave and we were going along with Maria and just going to the next thing. Okay, we're reacting. We're told to get out of town. Okay, we grab our couple things, our backpacks. She doesn't own a home, so she's like, I'm easy. I can just get in my car and go, which proves to be good because a whole bunch of people, of course, get stuck behind when a bridge collapses and things. And so because she is so unencumbered, she ends up in this position where so much is expected of her. Even by the end, there is no ticker tape parade for Maria being like, wow, you did it. Great job. Like you got them to Mars and all of that. She's sitting up there in Maryland and she's been given leave because, yeah, you've been through trauma. So you need to recover from that. And the thoughts all come back to money and survival and all of these things that are so real and so private and so quiet. And so I thought that was such an interesting and cool take on a story that had stakes this high, that you could save the world, save the world for those 7 or 8 astronauts and still not be able to afford rent at the end of it and thinking about leaving because of that. I thought that was really a poignant way to end. And then I think transitions really nicely into what I learned, what I took away from this story as a writer. My own current work in progress, I've started working on a new novel, and it's all about this Mars mission. And while I was brainstorming and coming up with everything, part of my thought process was, okay, I want 2 points of view. I want one of the astronauts, and I want this person on Earth who is watching these astronauts on their journey. The setup is like a reality TV show on their way to Mars. And one of the big decisions you have to make is, even if you have 2 different points of view, you need to have one protagonist. So who is the main character of this story? And I really struggled with this a lot because I knew my intuition was telling me that it was the girl on Earth. And there was this big mental pushback that I had of, the girl on Earth isn't the exciting character. She's not the astronaut. She's not the one on the way to Mars. How can I write a whole science fiction book where the main character never leaves Earth? Like, people are going to hate this. They're going to think it's boring. They're going to skip all her chapters and read all the astronaut chapters and just be like, this book was terrible. Why did you make that choice? And I think that I moved forward with it, and not until I read The Night Shift did I really realize and feel good and feel comfortable about that decision, that the protagonist doesn't have to be in the most exciting place, in the most exciting character. She still has an important story to tell. And that's the story I want to tell, is the one on Earth, is the one that I think readers will be able to connect with. And I love that about The Night Shift. We aren't trying to connect with an astronaut headed to Mars. Not that they're not a real person, but it's such an experience that's so far removed from us that we're connecting with that night shift worker. And I don't know about you, I've worked the night shift before, and I felt the exhaustion in all of this. And I was just like, you know what? I liked this story, even though we were never on that spaceship. And so that gave me kind of the confidence in my own decision, in my own writing, to be like, the main character can be anybody. It just has to be somebody who's got a story worth telling. And I think that was really, really helpful. And I think this is why you get the writing advice all the time. You have to read widely. Write a lot, read a lot. That's how you become a writer. This is just proving it to me over and over and over again. Not that I didn't trust the advice before, I definitely did. But I think that reading widely is something that you can think, oh, it's reading a lot of novels, specifically in your genre, or reading outside of your genre. Maybe that's how people take it. And for me, it was just reading. I got this message from a novelette, which is not a length I normally read. I tend to read either novellas, which are a little bit longer than this, or short stories. I love micro and flash fiction. And so this is in this in-between space. And what I really liked was reading that and getting that length of story in my brain. I don't know if novelettes are something that I want to write in the future, but I thought that it was really cool that you could have kind of this space to breathe in the short story. It didn't feel, in Flash, you've got to start right away, like right at the most important moment. You're looking at one thing and it packs a punch, and I love that. Novels, you've got all these strings, and anybody else who's a writer knows that writing a novel is no small feat, and it can take years, and it's so many different things. Novellas in my brain are always like a really good, tight movie because you've got some subplots, you've got some things going on, but it feels really complete. And then reading this novelette that lives in this land between short stories and novellas was really cool. It was almost like it was like a TV mini series because you got these different pieces. We started in Houston, and then we had her during the travel, and then we have the big moment, and then we have the little wrap up. So it wasn't as short as an episode. It wasn't as full as a movie. It wasn't as, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but it felt like a really cool length to try a couple of different things. You could linger a little bit. One of the cool moments in this is when she's traveling away from the hurricane that's coming, and she's at this gas station, which isn't a gas station, it's an electric charging station. Very cool world building. Loved that and how that was different. That was really cool. But she met this emergency worker, and so there's this kind of nice moment where she had this interaction with this emergency worker, and then she reflects on that at the very end. That's the kind of thing that gets cut in a short story. And so this was really cool. That was still there. And we had the time and the space to have that moment that I think feels really relatable. So that was cool. And really, that's all I've got for this week. I want to thank my brother for choosing this week's story, The Night Shift. Go ahead and check it out in Asimov's. It will be linked in the show notes below, like always. And I just want to remind you to like and follow the podcast, subscribe, whatever the platform says. Sometimes it's follow, sometimes it's subscribe. And head over to my social media. I'm going to put up that snack poll. I want to know, are you team lime Skittle or team green apple Skittle? All right, that's all for this week. Thank you so much for listening to Sci-Fi Snacks, and I'll see you next week.